Welcome back. I will be reading Halloween Night by RL Stine, published in 1993. Chapter 1. Brenda Morgan snapped the rubber band on the Halloween mask, then held it up in front of her face. Across the room, her friend, Tracy Warner, glanced up from a copy of 17 and made a disgusted face. What's that supposed to be, a monster? The rubber mask had an enormous eyeball that drooped down to its chin. Green gunk dripped from its nose, and one long tooth poked out between blood-splattered lips. "No, it's my cousin Hallie," Brenda joked. Dinah Smithers, her long legs tucked beneath her on the window seat, had been staring out the window. She turned to inspect Brenda's mask. "Why are you always picking on Hallie?" "I'm not," Brenda replied, poking her fingers through the eye holes. "That was a compliment." Tracy laughed and tossed the magazine down on the bed. She brushed her straight black hair behind the shoulders of her green sweater. "Brenda thinks Hallie is a monster," she told Dinah. "She is a monster," Brenda declared, twirling the mask in her hands. Dinah frowned. She climbed to her feet and stretched, her arms nearly reaching the low ceiling of Brenda's bedroom. Dinah was tall and slender, and the black catsuit she wore emphasized her boyish figure. "You should give that poor kid a break," she told Brenda. "Brenda's just angry because Hallie took her room, and she had to move into this closet," Tracy said, glancing around the small room. Brenda let the mask drop to her lap. "It's not a closet. I like this room," she insisted. "It's cozy." Tossing her black hair over her shoulders again, Tracy raised her eyes to the photographs tacked to the narrow space of wall beside the closet. "You don't even have room for your Luke Perry poster in here," she said. "I know," Brenda replied unhappily. "I have to go to Hallie's room to see it. She wanted to take it down, but I made her keep it." "It's her room now," Dinah said, walking over to the dresser mirror and pushing at the sides of her brown hair. "You should let her put up her own posters." "I like your hair short like that," Tracy commented. "It's too short," Dinah complained. "I look like a boy, a really tall boy." Dinah was constantly complaining about her looks, about how skinny she was, how her chin was too pointy, her nose too long, how she was taller than most of the boys they knew. "Why are you always sticking up for Hallie?" Brenda demanded, a hint of anger in her voice. "It isn't her room for permanent, you know. Hallie's only living here until her stupid parents work out their stupid divorce." She tossed the monster mask at Dinah. It bounced off Dinah's shoulder and landed on the white shag rug. "You're not wearing that mask to your Halloween party, are you?" Tracy asked. A long rectangle of sunlight through the bedroom window made Brenda's copper-colored hair glow. She tugged at the single braid behind her head. "No, it's Randy's mask," she told Tracy. Randy was her 10-year-old brother. "So what's your costume going to be?" Dinah asked, still studying herself in the mirror. "A clown," Brenda replied. Tracy stretched out on Brenda's bed. "You bought a clown costume?" "No way," Brenda said. "Hey, I'm the costume designer for the senior play, aren't I? I can sew anything. I started sewing it last Saturday. It's going to be the weirdest clown costume you ever saw." "What's Hallie going to be?" Dinah asked. Brenda opened her mouth to answer, but a loud shout interrupted her. "Brenda, turn down that music. I can't hear myself think down here." Brenda jumped at the sound of her mother's voice coming up through the air vent on the floor near the wall. "Sorry, Mom," she called down. Dinah hurried to the portable stereo on the bookshelf and clicked it off. "You have to remember to keep it down," Mrs. Morgan called. "The air vent comes down into the hallway. I was sitting in the living room and I could hear every note." "Sorry," Brenda repeated. "I didn't even realize it was on. Really." "You girls want anything? Some Cokes or something?" Mrs. Morgan asked. Brenda peered down. She could see her mother staring up at her through the open air vent. "No thanks, Mom. We're okay." "Is Hallie up there with you?" Mrs. Morgan asked. "No," Brenda replied, rolling her eyes. "I haven't seen her. She promised she'd help me fertilize the rhododendrons this afternoon. I'm so late getting the backyard ready for winter, and your father's been no help at all." "I haven't seen her," Brenda said curtly. She waited until she heard her mother's footsteps retreat to the living room. Then she hurried back to her two friends. "Hallie's always doing that. She's Little Miss Perfect around my parents. So polite. Always volunteering to help with chores and stuff." "What's wrong with that?" Dinah asked, returning to the window seat. She lowered herself slowly, then crossed her long legs in front of her. Hallie just does it to make me look bad, Brenda muttered. When my parents aren't around, she does nothing but complain about them and make fun of them. Oh, come on, Brenda. You're not being fair, Dinah accused. Oh, yeah? Brenda insisted. You should hear all the jokes Hallie makes about how fat my dad is. But when he's around, she's so nice to him. It's disgusting. She's probably just nervous, Dinah said thoughtfully. I mean, it would be really hard to have to live away from home and to go to a new school your senior year and everything. And Hallie's probably really messed up about her parents, Tracy added, pulling herself to a sitting position on the bed. Can you imagine? Your parents going to court and having a battle over who gets to keep you? Like your property or something, Dinah added. That can really mess you up, Tracy said, shaking her head. She's been through a rough time, Brenda admitted, tugging at her copper-colored braid. But that's no excuse. You two only see her when she's on her best behavior, but she's really mean-natured. She has a sarcastic sense of humor, that's all, Dinah remarked. Very dry. Very cold, Brenda insisted. She doesn't have a nice word to say about anyone. Brenda sighed. Her green eyes seemed to dim. I don't see why you both are taking her side. She's really awful. I've tried to be nice to her. You know, when she came here last month, I thought it would be kind of neat, like having a sister my own age. I imagined all the good times Hallie and I would have together, but Hallie hasn't been friendly at all. It's true. Brenda jumped to her feet, pulling down the bottom of her black sweatshirt over her faded jeans. Her friends could see that she was getting worked up. Whenever Brenda got excited, her face turned bright pink, and the freckles on her nose and cheeks darkened. Hallie and I are the same size, Brenda continued, balling her hands into fists at her sides. So she's constantly taking my clothes without asking, and the other night she couldn't find her government text. So she took mine and claimed it was hers. Hey, calm down, Brenda, Tracy said, sliding to the edge of the bed and lowering her feet to the floor. I can't calm down, Brenda cried. She makes me so mad. I even think she's been flirting with Ted. Dinah scratched her knee through the black tights. Are you and Ted going to the homecoming dance? She asked, obviously trying to change the subject. I guess, Brenda answered, her face still pink, her emerald eyes flashing with anger. Noah and I are going to drop by, Tracy said, searching for her sneakers under the bed. But we're probably not going to stay. School dances are always such a bore. Do you have a date? Brenda asked Dinah. Dinah lowered her dark eyes. She replied quietly. Dinah's too tall to date, Tracy teased. Shut up, Dinah snapped. Tracy gaped at her, open-mouthed. Oh, so now you're so sensitive about being tall we can't even joke about it? It's not a joke, Dinah insisted, staring out the window, her lips drawn in a pout. Suddenly, her expression changed. Hey, look who's coming. Huh? Who? Brenda rushed to the window, pushing Dinah aside so she could see down to the front yard. It's Hallie, Dinah told Tracy, and guess who she's with? Ted. I don't believe this, Brenda muttered. Look how she's grinning at him. Isn't that disgusting? Oh, I wish a fly would fly into her mouth. Tracy laughed. Dinah continued to stare out the window as Hallie and Ted made their way up the driveway. It's October, she said softly. All the flies are dead. What are they laughing about? Brenda asked angrily. What could be so funny? Calm down, Brenda, Tracy said, pulling on her left sneaker. There's no law against walking with Ted, you know. There should be a law against that disgusting grin, Brenda declared. Maybe her face will crack and disintegrate into 1,000 pieces. Tracy snickered. You're cuter than Hallie is, she offered, trying to calm her friend down. Cute? I don't want to be cute, Brenda cried. I'm sick of being cute. She pointed down toward the front yard. Look at her tossing her blonde hair around. That's so cheap. Dinah glanced at her watch, and her eyes grew wide with horror. Oh no, I'm late for work. Dr. Harper will have a fit. Are you still working in that vet's office? Tracy asked, making a face. Cleaning up after the poodles? Dinah didn't reply. She jumped up, pushing nervously at the sides of her short hair. Later, guys. But before she could reach the doorway, Hallie walked in. Hi, everyone, she grinned at them, pushing her light blonde hair back off her forehead. She wore tight, straight-legged jeans under a magenta V-necked sweater. Ted entered the room behind her, glancing at Brenda, then looking quickly away. How's it going? Hallie asked. Before anyone could reply, she turned to Brenda. Can I borrow your car? Just for an hour. Ted offered to give me a driving lesson. Isn't that great? You know how nervous I am about the parking exam. Brenda's mouth dropped open. Her face turned bright pink and her freckles darkened. Borrow the car? You don't mind, do you? Hallie asked, smiling at Ted. We're just going to drive to the mall parking lot so I can practice parking. No, okay, Brenda stammered. Biting her lower lip, she made her way to the dresser and picked up the keys to the little blue Geo her dad had bought her for her 17th birthday. She turned back, her eyes on Ted. He had his hands jammed into his jeans pockets. His mop of curly brown hair was unbrushed as usual. Brenda handed the keys to Hallie. Call me later, she told Ted, after dinner. Maybe we can study math together. Yeah, good. See you later. He turned and made his way quickly out of the room. Hallie closed her hand around the car keys. See you. I'll try not to total it, she said. She hurried after Ted. Brenda listened to their footsteps going down the stairs. Then she turned to her two friends. Do you believe it? She cried. She takes my boyfriend and my car and doesn't even say thanks or anything. Do you believe it? I have an idea, Tracy said, her silvery eyes lighting up with excitement. She stepped up beside Brenda. What kind of idea? Brenda asked skeptically. Let's murder her, Tracy suggested. Chapter 2. Turn the wheel a little more, Ted instructed. He was twisted in the front passenger seat, craning his neck to peer out the rear window. Now ease it back slowly. Like this? Hallie asked uncertainly. She lowered her foot on the gas pedal, and the back end of the little blue Geo slid partway into the space between two parked cars. Whoa, Ted cried. A second too late. The Geo tapped the bumper of the car parked behind it. Oops, Hallie said, turning to grin at him. She tossed her blonde hair off her forehead with one hand. Her blue eyes sparkled mischievously. Pull it forward a little, then ease back again, Ted told her. Here, put your arm on the back of the seat and turn so you can see better. He took her hand and raised it to the seat back. She smiled at him and obediently backed the car out. They were in a corner of the vast concrete parking lot. There were a few cars parked this far away from the stores. The late afternoon sun, glowing red among puffy streaks of white cloud, was lowering itself behind the buildings. Am I turning the wheel right? Hallie asked in a tiny voice. A little more, Ted instructed. A little more. This time she managed to squeeze into the space without bumping anything. Whew! Hallie sighed loudly and turned to Ted with a pleased smile. I did it. He smiled back at her shyly. She liked the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Should we try it again? I guess, she replied. Do you think I'm getting it? Yeah, it isn't so hard, he said, once you get the back in. She squeezed the arm of his sweater. This is really nice of you, Ted. I mean, giving me this lesson. He blushed and scratched his thick mane of brown hair. Well, I had an hour free, so his voice trailed off. He hadn't noticed that she had removed her hand from his arm. Everyone's been so nice to me, Hallie said in a soft voice, her blue eyes studying his face. I mean, the Morgans have just been great. I don't know what I would have done. Hallie swallowed hard, then continued, her eyes locked on Ted's face. I couldn't stay at home, not while my parents were battling it out. It was such a nightmare. Lawyers in and out, my mom and dad shrieking at each other over the phone, everyone crying all the time. That's really bad news, Ted muttered uncomfortably, staring straight ahead at the windshield. He began tapping his right hand nervously against the passenger door. Brenda and her friends have been really great too, Hallie continued, squeezing his arm. I mean, they're not quite what I'm used to. They're, a little unsophisticated, she giggled. You won't tell Brenda I said that, will you? Ted blushed again. Said what? He joked. No, they've been great, Hallie repeated. Really. Across the parking lot... Sorry, you can hear my cat running around. Across the parking lot, an enormous white truck squealed as it pulled to a stop behind a restaurant. John's Buns were the words painted in red and gold on the side panel. Beneath them was a bright painting of a huge hamburger bun. That whole truck is filled with buns, Ted said. Amazing. Wow, Hallie said sarcastically. Doesn't take a whole lot to get you excited, does it? She laughed. Maybe we should practice parallel parking one more time, Ted suggested, glancing at the dashboard clock. It's getting pretty close to dinner time. He tried to pull his arm out from under her hand. As he moved away, his hand brushed her pocketbook, which she had set down between the two seats. The bag toppled over, spilling its contents on the floor at Ted's feet. Oh, sorry. Straining against the seat belt, he leaned forward to pick up her things, and his eyes settled on a small card inside a clear plastic holder. He grabbed it and raised it to his face. Hey, what's this? Hallie tried to grab it away from him, but Ted had already seen it. A driver's license with her name, Hallie Benson, on it. Whoa, he cried, staring hard at the card. You already have your license. Give me that. She grabbed it out of his hand. But then her look of distress quickly gave way to an amused smile. Her blue eyes lit up. It's not a very good picture of me, is it? She said, studying the small, faded snapshot in the corner of the license. I don't get it, Ted stammered. You already have your license. Why did you want a lesson? Hallie tucked the license into the bag. Then she raised her eyes slowly to Ted's. She wet her lips. Her blonde hair fell over her forehead. I just wanted to get you alone, she whispered. Then, before Ted could remove the startled expression from his face, Hallie reached over, slid her hands around the back of his neck, and pulled his face down to hers. With a tiny cry, she pressed her warm lips against his, softly at first, then harder. The kiss lasted a long time. When it ended, they were both breathing hard. Hallie started to remove her hands from Ted's neck, but then she changed her mind and pulled him back for another kiss. Whoa, he uttered after a long while, pulling his head back. He reached up and gently pulled her hands away. Whoa. She giggled mischievously, her eyes gleaming as they stared into his. Uh-oh, Ted said. We shouldn't, we shouldn't. Then he moved close for another kiss. Her hair fell softly over his face. Somewhere behind them, a car honked. They paid no attention. When the kiss ended, Hallie brushed back her hair and smiled. Wow, she whispered. Now what are we going to do about Brenda? Chapter 3. Randy, get lost, Brenda pleaded. Why are you hanging around here? Because you're so interesting, her brother replied sarcastically. He picked up a little stuffed panda from her dresser top and squeezed it hard. Put that down, Brenda cried. You're deliberately trying to get me mad. It's my hobby, Randy told her, squeezing the bear again until it was almost flat. Brenda stepped up angrily behind Randy and gripped his shoulders. Out! Get out, she insisted. Dinah, Tracy, and I are trying to work. No, you're not, Randy replied, allowing Brenda to push him to the door. You're sitting around, talking about boys as usual. Tracy laughed. Brenda scowled at her. Don't encourage him. Don't encourage me, Randy repeated. He pulled away from Brenda and made his way to the door, where he turned and tossed the panda. It bounced off Brenda's forehead and fell to the floor. Cute, Brenda muttered. Very cute. I know I am, was Randy's closing line. He made a rude noise with his tongue between his lips and ran down the hall. Brenda bent to pick up the panda. Charming, isn't he? She said sarcastically. It runs in the family, Tracy joked. What's that supposed to mean? Brenda tossed the panda at Tracy's head. It missed and bounced off the wall. Why does your brother like to hang around us all the time? Dinah asked. I think he has a crush on you, Brenda teased. Dinah sighed. Maybe he could be my date for homecoming. No way, Randy screamed from the hall. Get lost, Randy, I mean it. Brenda shrieked angrily. Stop listening to every word we say. She waited, listening to his footsteps as he made his way down the stairs. Then she glanced quickly out her bedroom window. It was a gray afternoon, the first cold day of fall, so cold that her father had turned the furnace on for the first time. Tracy and Dinah had come over after lunch to work on their writing project, but so far they hadn't gotten any work done because Randy was being such a pest. Dinah, dressed in maroon sweats, had taken her usual place on the window seat, her long legs tucked beneath her. Tracy, in black tights and an oversized white sweater, stretched out on the white shag rug. Brenda, after returning the battered panda to its place on the dresser, sat down on the edge of the bed. She was wearing faded jeans and an orange t-shirt under a green t-shirt. Did you go out with Ted last night? Dinah asked her. Brenda nodded. She picked up the costume she'd been working on when her friends had arrived and began stitching a sleeve. You go somewhere or just hang around? Tracy asked. We didn't do much, Brenda said, frowning. Ted seemed really distracted. I mean, he barely said a word, like his mind was on something else. She shrugged and kept sewing. Weird, Tracy muttered. He can be like that sometimes, Dinah said matter-of-factly. Brenda gazed up at her friend. She had forgotten that Dinah had gone out with Ted for a while when they were juniors. Noah and I went to that Clint Eastwood movie, Tracy offered. It was so violent, I couldn't believe it. Noah loved it. Sounds like Noah, Dinah said dryly. And what's new with Hallie? She asked Brenda, staring out the window. You two getting along any better? I guess, Brenda replied, concentrating on her stitches. We haven't really talked much. I kind of get the feeling that she's been avoiding me, which is fine with me. She adjusted the sleeve, then resumed sewing. Every time we do run into each other, Hallie always has the strangest smile on her face. What kind of smile? Tracy asked, sitting up straight on the rug, pulling her black hair behind her head in a ponytail, then letting it go. I can't really describe it, Brenda said. It's like she knows a secret or something, you know? A really smug smile. So, are we really going to murder her? Tracy asked. Yeah, let's, Brenda replied, chuckling. I'll really enjoy that. It's really sick, Dinah objected, lowering her feet to the floor and leaning forward on the window seat. I mean, what happens when she finds out? We'll tell her it was just a joke, Brenda said. But she'll be really hurt, Dinah insisted. I know. Let's murder Ted too, Brenda said with growing excitement. Great, a double murder, Tracy exclaimed, clapping her hands. Dinah gazed at Brenda, a shocked expression on her face. You really want to murder Ted? Why not? Brenda asked casually. Mrs. Ryland is a cool teacher, Tracy said. She thinks of really great assignments. If only she could find pants that fit, Brenda said, snickering. What's with those baggy bottoms? They all laughed. It's just the way she's built, I think, Dinah offered. But she's a cool teacher, especially for an English teacher. I mean, this is a really great writing assignment. Well, plotting a murder mystery isn't going to be that easy, Brenda replied thoughtfully. I mean, we know who we want for our victims, but now we need suspects, and clues, and a detective or something. I think we should be the detectives in the story, Dinah suggested, climbing to her feet and bending from side to side in an impromptu aerobics limbering exercise. No way, Tracy protested. We have to be the murderers. 3 murderers? Brenda asked. 3 murderers for 2 murders? Well, Tracy frowned, thinking hard. Yeah, she said finally. Thinking up a good murder plot is going to be harder than I thought. I mean, we can't just have someone shoot Hallie and Ted. We have to think up something more clever. Strangling? Brenda suggested quietly. Strangling would be good, for Hallie anyway. Not clever enough, Tracy said, playing with her hair. Yeah, we need plot twists, Dinah agreed, still exercising. You know, some surprises. She stopped for a moment. What did Miss Ryland call them? Red herrings? Yeah, things to fool the reader. Throw them off the track, Brenda said, like false clues and false suspects. Hey, I know. She held up the clown costume she was sewing. The murderer is a clown? Tracy asked, confused. No, let's make it a Halloween murder, Brenda suggested. You know, at a costume party. Oh, that's great, Tracy declared. You mean everyone's in costume, right? Dinah asked, dropping back onto the window seat. And so there's no way to know who the murderer is. Yeah, Brenda said enthusiastically. And Hallie is in costume too, and she gets stabbed or something. Maybe Ted stabs Hallie, Tracy suggested. Maybe, Brenda said, tilting her head. A habit she had whenever she was thinking too hard about something. And since everyone is in costume, and it's a really crowded party, like yours is going to be, Tracy interrupted. I don't like this, Dinah broke in. I mean, it's too real or something. Huh? What do you mean? Brenda asked, lowering the clown costume to her lap and reaching for the unfinished sleeve. I mean, it's too real. It's kind of giving me the creeps, Dinah told her with a shudder. She pushed nervously at her short brown hair. Maybe we shouldn't use real names. Maybe we should just make up people. It's supposed to be fiction, right? Yeah, that's true, Tracy agreed. But it'll be so much more satisfying to kill Hallie off, Brenda argued, even if it's only on paper. But it's so mean, Dinah cried. Someone will tell her. She's bound to find out, Brenda. Brenda shrugged. You think it's mean because you don't have to live with her. She's the one who's mean. Ask Randy. Even Randy thinks she's mean. Brenda stared suspiciously at Dinah. Hey, why are you always sticking up for Hallie? Huh? Dinah reacted with surprise. I'm not, really. I just think, well, I just think that you're not being very understanding. Hallie's obviously going through a terrible time. I bet she's totally messed up about her parents. I mean, I remember when my parents split up and... Her voice trailed off. Suddenly, a flood of memories swept over Brenda. I completely forgot, she realized. Dinah went through the same thing. Dinah's parents had a terrible custody battle over her, and Dinah freaked out or something. How could I have forgotten all of that? Brenda asked herself, staring hard at Dinah. No wonder Dinah always takes Hallie's side. Dinah has been through the same nightmare. You two probably don't remember what I went through, Dinah said with a surprising bitterness. She turned away from Brenda and Tracy and stared out the window. Then suddenly her mouth dropped open, and she uttered a low gasp. Dinah, what is it? Brenda asked, jumping to her feet. Dinah didn't reply. She stared down to the driveway, her mouth still hanging open. Dinah, what's out there? Brenda demanded. Nothing, Dinah started to say, but Brenda and Tracy both rushed up beside her. Their knees on the window seat, they pressed their faces to the window and stared down. There in the driveway stood Ted's old Honda Civic. It took Brenda a while to focus on what she was seeing. It all appeared to be happening in slow motion. At first, she saw the gray glare of clouds reflected in the windshield. Then the back of Hallie's head came into view. All that blonde hair, Brenda thought. What is Hallie doing? She's sitting in the passenger seat, but she's leaning over to the driver's side. Brenda stared for the longest time at the back of Hallie's head. And finally, the whole picture came into focus behind the glare of the windshield. And she realized with a jolt that ran down her entire body that Hallie was kissing Ted. Uttering a loud gasp, Brenda pulled back from the window and jumped to her feet. I'll murder Hallie for real, she cried. I really will.